The Twisted Yellow Brick Road. Dorothy Gale had always thought of Oz as a magical place, a world where she had once found friends, adventure, and the power to return home. But now, standing at the entrance of the Yellow Brick Road once again, something was different. The road was cracked, the yellow bricks faded and covered in creeping shadows. The skies above, once bright and full of color, were now a dull, lifeless gray. Oz was not the land of her memories. It was twisted, broken, and something dark had taken hold. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when she tried to click her heels. She was desperate to leave, to return to Kansas. But no matter how many times she clicked, the magic didn't work. The familiar tingling sensation that had once carried her home was gone. It was as if the power of her ruby slippers had been drained, leaving her trapped in this distorted version of Oz. The road stretched endlessly before her, the once vibrant landscape now overrun with twisted trees and thorny vines. Dorothy had no choice but to follow the yellow bricks. They were her only guide, her only hope. But with each step she took, the road seemed to grow darker, more ominous. The cheerful Munchkins were nowhere to be found, their homes abandoned and overgrown with weeds. Even Toto, her faithful companion, was gone. Dorothy's heart raced as she heard whispers on the wind. They were faint at first, barely audible over the sound of her own footsteps, but as she continued down the road, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Dorothy, you shouldn't have come back?" She spun around, her breath catching in her throat, but there was no one there. Just the dark, empty road behind her, stretching into the distance like a twisted, never-ending spiral. The days passed in a blur of confusion and fear. The road led her in circles, twisting and turning through a landscape that was both familiar and terrifying. The landmarks she had once known, the Emerald City, the Scarecrow's Field, the Tin Man's cottage, were all there, but they had been corrupted, distorted by whatever darkness had taken hold of Oz. The Scarecrow's Field was now filled with dead, rotting crops, the sky above it choked with black clouds. The Tin Man's cottage lay in ruins, its walls caved in, and the air around it thick with the stench of rust and decay. And the Emerald City, once a beacon of hope and light, was now a towering, dark silhouette against the horizon, its green glow faded to a sickly, eerie hue. Dorothy's mind began to unravel. She saw figures in the distance, shadows moving just beyond the edge of her vision, watching her, waiting. The whispers followed her wherever she went, growing louder and more insistent with each passing day. "Dorothy, you can never leave?" She tried to block them out, to focus on finding her way back home, but the road was endless. No matter how far she walked, she always ended up back where she started. The yellow bricks crumbled beneath her feet, and the shadows seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with their presence. One night, as she sat by a dying fire, the whispers became screams, loud, piercing, and filled with rage. "Dorothy, you don't belong here." Dorothy covered her ears, her heart pounding in her chest, but the screams only grew louder, more deafening. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, and in that moment, she realized the truth. Oz was no longer the magical land she had once known. It had been twisted, corrupted by some unseen force, and now it was a prison. A place where she would be trapped forever. As the days turned into weeks, Dorothy's desperation grew. She wandered the dark, twisted landscape, her mind unraveling with each step. She saw the faces of her old friends, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, but they were no longer the kind, gentle beings she had once known. Their faces were twisted, grotesque, their eyes filled with malice and anger. "Dorothy, you don't belong here?" The words echoed in her mind, over and over, until they were all she could hear. She tried to run, to escape the nightmare that had consumed Oz, but the road always brought her back. No matter how far she went, she was always led back to the same place, the beginning of the yellow brick road, where it all started. And there, standing in the shadows, was a figure she hadn't seen since the day she left Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West. The witch's voice was cold and cruel as she stepped out of the shadows, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You thought you could leave, Dorothy? You thought you could escape me?" Dorothy backed away, her heart pounding in her chest, but there was nowhere to go. The road had closed in around her, the shadows pressing down like a suffocating weight. "You don't belong here, Dorothy," the witch hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You never did. And now you'll never leave." Dorothy's vision blurred, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. She tried to click her heels again, desperate to escape, but the magic was gone. The ruby slippers had lost their power, and now she was trapped. In the end, Dorothy realized the terrible truth. There was no escape from Oz. The yellow brick road was a twisted labyrinth, designed to keep her trapped in an endless loop of fear and despair. The land she had once thought of as magical was now a prison, and she was its prisoner. As the shadows closed in around her, Dorothy Gale, the girl from Kansas, knew that she would never see home again.